In a galaxy far, far away, a group of alien spies arrived on Earth. Their mission? To observe the humans and learn their ways before the big war began. The alien commander, Zorax, had heard stories of the humans. They are a primitive species, he told his team. They fight with metal sticks and throw rocks. This will be an easy mission. Zorax and his team set up camp on a hill overlooking the human military base. They used their advanced technology to zoom in and watch the humans prepare for battle. What they saw next left them shocked and confused. The human soldiers were doing the strangest things. They stood in lines and shouted strange words in unison. They waved flags and sang songs. Some even danced around fires and painted their faces. "What are they doing?" asked Zorax's second-in-command, Vixer. "It looks like some kind of primitive ritual." Zorax furrowed his brow. "I have no idea. I've never seen anything like it." The more they watched, the more puzzled they became. The humans seemed to be wasting a lot of time and energy on these odd rituals. Why weren't they busy preparing their weapons or planning their strategies? "Maybe they think these dances and chants will magically help them win the war," scoffed Zorax. "How foolish." Vixer nodded. "They are even more primitive than we thought. This war will be over quickly." As the sun set, the aliens watched the humans gather around campfires. They expected to see them sharpening spears or practicing combat moves. Instead, the humans were laughing, singing, and telling stories. "They're not taking this seriously at all," grumbled Zorax. "They act like this is some kind of game or party." The aliens retired to their ship for the night, shaking their heads at the strange behavior of the humans. They were sure that this would be the easiest conquest in their species' history. Little did they know that the humans' pre-battle rituals were not a sign of weakness, but of strength. The singing, dancing, and bonding were actually building morale, unity, and fighting spirit among the troops. The painted faces and warrior chants were ancient traditions passed down by their ancestors, fearsome fighters who had never lost a battle. And those campfire stories, they were tales of legendary heroes, meant to inspire courage and determination in the hearts of the soldiers. The aliens had badly underestimated their enemy. They judged the humans by their own standards and failed to see the power in their strange customs. As Zorax and his team drifted off to sleep that night, they had no idea that they were about to get a rude awakening. The humans were not the primitive, defenseless creatures they appeared to be. They were fierce warriors with an unbreakable spirit, and they were ready to fight to the death to defend their home. The battle was about to begin, and the aliens were in for the shock of their lives. The calm before the storm. As dawn broke over the military base, the alien spies woke up eager to see what the humans would do next. They expected to see them rushing around in a panic, trying to prepare for the impending battle. But to their surprise, the humans seemed oddly calm and focused. They went about their morning routines with a sense of purpose and determination. Zorax watched as the human soldiers gathered in small groups, talking quietly and intently. They seemed to be discussing something important, but the aliens couldn't make out what they were saying. "What do you think they're talking about?" asked Vixer. "Probably trying to come up with some primitive battle plan," scoffed Zorax. "As if that will help them against our superior technology." But as they continued to observe, the aliens started to notice something strange. The humans weren't just talking. They were bonding. They were sharing stories, showing each other pictures, and even laughing together. It was a side of the humans that the aliens had never seen before. They seemed almost human. Zorax was starting to feel uneasy. He had always been taught that humans were inferior beings, barely more than animals. But watching them interact like this, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to them than he had been led to believe. As the morning went on, the humans continued their preparations. They checked their weapons, went over maps and plans, and synchronized their watches. But even in the midst of all this activity, they still found time to connect with each other on a personal level. One soldier showed his buddy a picture of his newborn daughter back home. Another shared a funny story about his grandmother's cooking. A group of friends sang an old marching song together, their voices ringing out across the base. To the aliens, it all seemed so strange and pointless. Why waste time on such trivial things when there was a war to be fought? But little by little, they started to understand. The humans weren't just preparing for battle. They were preparing mentally and emotionally. They were building bonds of trust and camaraderie that would help them face the challenges ahead. They were also reminding each other of what they were fighting for. Not just abstract concepts like duty or honor, but real, tangible things like family, friends, and home. As the day wore on, the atmosphere at the base started to change. The casual conversations and laughter gave way to a more serious, focused energy. The soldiers checked their gear one last time, said their goodbyes, and headed out to their positions. The aliens watched them go, still trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. The humans had shown a side of themselves that was far more complex and nuanced than the aliens had ever imagined. They weren't just primitive savages or mindless drones. They were individuals with their own hopes, fears, and motivations. They were a force to be reckoned with, not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their spirit and their humanity. As the last of the soldiers disappeared from view, Zorax turned to his team with a newfound sense of unease. "I have a feeling we may have underestimated these humans," he said quietly. "This may not be as easy as we thought." Vixer nodded, a grim expression on his face. "I agree. We need to be careful. They may surprise us yet." The aliens settled in to wait, watching the horizon for any sign of the humans' approach. The calm before the storm was over. The battle was about to begin, and no one knew quite what to expect. All hell breaks loose. The silence was shattered by a deafening boom. The ground shook as a massive explosion ripped through the air. The battle had begun. Zorax and his team scrambled to their feet, rushing to their observation post. They watched in horror as the sky lit up with lasers and missiles, crisscrossing like deadly fireworks. "Look at that!" exclaimed Vixer, pointing to a group of human soldiers charging towards the alien front line. "They're attacking head-on. Are they insane?" Zorax shook his head in disbelief. "They must be. No sane creature would rush into battle like that against a superior foe." But as they watched, the humans proved to be far from insane. They moved with precision and purpose, dodging and weaving through the laser fire like dancers in a lethal ballet. They took cover behind boulders and in trenches, popping up to take shots at the alien troops before ducking back down. They worked in teams, covering each other and communicating through hand signals and shouts. The aliens were taken aback. This was not the primitive, disorganized rabble they had expected. These humans were skilled fighters, with tactics and strategies that rivaled their own. Zorax barked orders to his own troops, trying to counter the humans' moves. But every time they thought they had the upper hand, the humans would pull off some daring new maneuver that left the aliens reeling. They used the terrain to their advantage, luring the aliens into ambushes and traps. They employed guerrilla warfare tactics, striking hard and fast before melting back into the shadows. And through it all, they never gave up. No matter how many of their comrades fell, the humans kept fighting with a ferocity and determination that was almost frightening to behold. Vixer turned to Zorax, his eyes wide with shock. "I've never seen anything like this," he said. "These humans, they're not like any enemy we've ever faced before." Zorax nodded grimly. "I'm starting to understand why they do all those strange rituals before battle. It's not just superstition, it's preparation. They're steeling themselves for the fight ahead." As the battle raged on, the aliens found themselves being pushed back. The humans were relentless, never giving them a moment's rest. They seemed to have an endless supply of courage and energy, even as their numbers dwindled. The aliens, on the other hand, were starting to falter. They had relied too heavily on their technology, and now that the humans had found ways to counter it, they were struggling to adapt. Zorax watched as one of his own soldiers fell to a human sniper's bullet. He felt a pang of something he had never experienced before. Fear. For the first time in his life, he was facing an enemy that he wasn't sure he could beat. An enemy that was willing to fight to the last man, to never surrender, to die for their cause. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, casting long shadows across the scorched earth, Zorax made a decision. He called for a retreat, much to the shock of his troops. "But sir," protested one soldier, "we can't let the humans win." Zorax shook his head. "This isn't about winning or losing anymore. This is about survival. We need to regroup, to rethink our strategy. We've underestimated these humans for too long." As the alien forces pulled back, the humans let out a cheer that echoed across the battlefield. They had won this round, against all odds. But as Zorax and his team watched from a distance, they knew that this was only the beginning. The humans had proven themselves to be a formidable foe, one that would not be easily defeated. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. And the aliens were starting to realize that they were in for the fight of their lives. David vs. Goliath. The aliens regrouped at their base, licking their wounds and trying to make sense of what had just happened. They had never encountered a species like the humans before, a species that could hold their own against a technologically superior foe. Zorax pored over the data they had collected during the battle, looking for any weakness they could exploit. But the more he looked, the more he realized that the human strength lay not in their weapons or their numbers, but in their spirit. They were like the legendary figure David from human mythology, facing down the giant Goliath with nothing but a sling and a stone. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they refused to back down. Vixer entered the room, looking grim. "Sir, our scouts have reported that the humans are on the move again. They're heading towards the canyon to the west." Zorax frowned. The canyon was a strategic choke point, one that the aliens had been planning to use to their advantage. If the humans got there first, they could set up a defensive position that would be almost impossible to breach. "We have to stop them," he said. "Send in our heavy artillery. We'll crush them before they even reach the canyon." But as the alien forces moved out, they found themselves walking into a trap. The humans had anticipated their move and set up ambushes all along the route. Small teams of human soldiers popped up from behind rocks and ridges, firing off quick bursts before disappearing back into the terrain. The aliens fired back, but it was like trying to hit ghosts. The humans were too quick, too elusive. As they neared the canyon, the aliens found themselves being funneled into a narrow pass. Suddenly, all hell broke loose as the humans unleashed a barrage of fire from above. They had set up sniper positions on the cliff tops, raining down death on the alien troops below. The aliens fired back with their laser cannons, but the humans had already moved on to their next position. Zorax watched helplessly as his soldiers fell one by one. The humans were using the terrain to their advantage, just like they had in the previous battle. They knew every rock and crevice of this land. It was their home turf. The alien commander felt a grudging respect for his enemy. They were smart, adaptable, and brave. They were using every trick in the book to level the playing field against a superior foe. As the battle wore on, the aliens found themselves being pushed back once again. The humans were relentless, never giving them a moment to regroup or catch their breath. Zorax recalled an old human saying he had heard once. "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." He had never really understood what that meant until now. The humans were like a pack of wild dogs, small but fierce and unyielding. They would fight to the last breath to defend their territory and their way of life. In contrast, the aliens were like a lumbering bear, big and strong, but slow and predictable. They had grown complacent in their superiority, and now they were paying the price. As the sun began to set once again, Zorax made the call to retreat back to their base. They had lost too many soldiers, and the humans showed no signs of letting up. As they trudged back across the war-torn landscape, Zorax couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The humans had proven themselves to be a formidable enemy, one that would not go down easily. They were like David, facing down the Goliath of the galaxy. And just like in the old story, it seemed that the underdog might just have a chance of winning after all. The aliens would have to rethink their entire strategy if they wanted to have any hope of victory. They had underestimated the humans once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The Hail Mary. Back at their base, the human soldiers huddled together, exhausted and battered but still unbroken. They had won 2 major victories against the alien invaders, but they knew the war was far from over. Captain Sarah Williams, the leader of the human forces, looked around at her weary troops. They were running low on supplies and ammunition, and many of them were injured. But in their eyes, she could still see the fierce determination that had carried them this far. "Listen up," she said, her voice ringing out over the assembled soldiers. "We've held our own against these aliens so far, but we all know they'll be back, and in greater numbers. We need a plan." The soldiers murmured amongst themselves, throwing out ideas and suggestions, but nothing seemed feasible. They were too outnumbered, too outgunned. That's when Corporal Jake Thompson spoke up. "What about a Hail Mary?" he said. The others looked at him, confused. "A what?" asked Sergeant Mike Rodriguez. "You know, a Hail Mary," said Jake. "A last-ditch, all-or-nothing play. We've got nothing left to lose at this point." Sarah considered this for a moment. It was a crazy idea. But then again, everything about this war had been crazy so far. "Okay," she said finally. "What's your plan?" Jake took a deep breath. "We stage a raid on their command center. We sneak in, plant some explosives, and take out their leader. Without their commander, the rest of the alien forces will be in disarray." The others stared at him in disbelief. It was a suicide mission. The command center would be heavily guarded, and they'd be going in with only a handful of soldiers. But Sarah could see the logic in it. If they could pull it off, it might just turn the tide of the war. "All right," she said. "Let's do it. But we need to be smart about this. We'll need a diversion to draw their attention away from the command center." The soldiers set to work, coming up with a plan. They would stage a series of small attacks on the alien perimeter, making it look like they were trying to break through. Meanwhile, a small team led by Sarah and Jake would sneak around to the back of the command center and plant the explosives. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. As dawn broke on the 3rd day of the war, the human forces put their plan into action. The perimeter attacks began, drawing the alien troops away from the command center. Sarah, Jake, and their team made their way through the rough terrain, dodging patrols and using every bit of cover they could find. They had to move quickly. They knew they only had a small window of opportunity. Finally, they reached the command center. It was a massive, imposing structure, bristling with alien technology. But there was no time to be intimidated. They had a job to do. They split up, planting explosives at key structural points. Sarah's heart was pounding in her chest as she worked, knowing that every second counted. Just as they were about to make their escape, they heard a shout from behind them. They had been spotted by an alien patrol. Sarah and Jake exchanged a glance. They both knew what they had to do. "Go," said Sarah. "I'll hold them off." Jake hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He signaled to the others, and they began to make their way back to the rendezvous point. Sarah turned to face the oncoming aliens, her weapon at the ready. She knew this was likely a one-way trip, but she was prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for her people. The aliens closed in, their weapons blazing. Sarah fought with everything she had, taking down one after another. But there were too many of them. Just as she was about to be overwhelmed, she heard a massive explosion from behind her. The command center erupted in a ball of fire, sending shockwaves through the ground. Sarah smiled grimly. They had done it. Against all odds, the Hail Mary had worked. As the alien forces scattered in confusion, Sarah made her escape. She didn't know if she would make it back to her own lines, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had struck a blow against the invaders and shown them that humanity would never give up, never surrender. The war was not over yet, but thanks to the bravery and sacrifice of soldiers like Sarah and Jake, there was still hope for the future. Through alien eyes, Zorax stood amidst the ruins of the alien command center, his eyes wide with disbelief. Just a few hours ago, this had been the nerve center of their entire operation, a symbol of their technological superiority and military might. Now, it was nothing more than a smoking crater, destroyed by a handful of human soldiers with little more than primitive explosives and sheer audacity. Around him, the surviving members of his team stumbled through the wreckage, their faces a mix of shock, anger, and fear. They had never experienced a defeat like this before, never even conceived of the possibility that a species as primitive as the humans could pose a threat to them. Zorax himself was still trying to process what had happened. He had underestimated the humans from the beginning, dismissing them as little more than savages with sticks and stones. But as the war had progressed, he had begun to see a different side to them, a fierce, unyielding spirit that refused to be broken no matter the odds. He thought back to the strange rituals he had witnessed before the battle, the way the humans had bonded and prepared themselves mentally and emotionally for the fight ahead. At the time, he had dismissed it as mere superstition and foolishness. But now he was starting to understand. Those rituals weren't just empty gestures. They were a way for the humans to tap into something deep within themselves, a source of strength and courage that went beyond mere physical prowess or technological might. As he surveyed the destruction around him, Zorax found himself feeling something he had never experienced before, a grudging respect for his enemy. The humans had proven themselves to be worthy adversaries, with a skill and determination that belied their primitive appearance. But there was something else too, a sense of unease, a feeling that he was looking at the world through new eyes. For the first time in his life, Zorax was questioning everything he had ever been taught about the superiority of his own species. He had always believed that the aliens were destined to conquer the galaxy, to bring order and civilization to the primitive races that inhabited it. But now he was starting to wonder if that belief was nothing more than arrogance and hubris. The humans had shown him that there was more to life than just technology and conquest. They had a spirit, a sense of community and purpose that the aliens had long since forgotten in their pursuit of power. As he stood there, lost in thought, Vixer approached him cautiously. "Sir," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "what do we do now?" Zorax was silent for a long moment, his eyes still fixed on the smoking ruins of the command center. "We have to report back to the council," he said finally. "They need to know what happened here." Vixer looked confused. "But sir," he said, "won't they be angry? We failed in our mission." Zorax shook his head. "No," he said, "we didn't fail. We learned something important today, something that could change the course of our entire species." He turned to face his team, his eyes blazing with a new intensity. "The humans have shown us that there is more to life than just conquest and domination," he said. "They have a spirit, a resilience that we have lost sight of in our pursuit of power. We need to learn from them, to find a new way forward." The others looked at him in surprise, unsure how to respond. But Zorax could see the glimmer of understanding in their eyes, the realization that something fundamental had shifted in their worldview. As they began to make their way back to their own lines, Zorax couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The war was not over yet. There would be many more battles to come, many more sacrifices to be made on both sides. But for the first time, he felt a sense of hope, a belief that there could be a future beyond the endless cycle of war and conquest, a future in which the aliens and the humans could learn to coexist and even thrive together. It was a distant and uncertain future, to be sure. But as Zorax looked up at the stars above, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that he would face them with a new understanding of what it meant to be truly alive, and a newfound respect for the incredible resilience and spirit of the human race. The first of many. As the dust settled over the battlefield, the human soldiers emerged from their trenches and bunkers, their faces etched with a mix of exhaustion, relief, and disbelief. They had done the impossible. They had defeated a technologically superior enemy through sheer grit, determination, and a refusal to give up even in the face of overwhelming odds. All around them, the evidence of the hard-fought battle was clear. The ground was littered with the twisted remains of alien machines and weapons, the air thick with the acrid smell of smoke and burning metal. But amidst the destruction, there was also a sense of triumph, a feeling that, for the first time in the war, the humans had the upper hand. Captain Sarah Williams limped towards the center of the battlefield, her face streaked with dirt and blood. She had taken a hit during the final assault on the alien command center, but she barely felt the pain. Her mind was too focused on the incredible victory they had just achieved. As she reached the center of the field, she was met by a roar of cheers and applause from her fellow soldiers. They surged forward, clapping her on the back and shouting their congratulations. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to bask in the glow of their admiration, but only for a moment. She knew that this was just the beginning. The aliens would be back, and they would be stronger and more determined than ever. The humans had won a battle, but the war was far from over. As if on cue, a voice crackled over the radio. It was General John Adams, the commander of the human forces. "Captain Williams," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "Congratulations on your victory, but I'm afraid I have some bad news." Sarah felt her heart sink. She knew what was coming. "What is it, sir?" she asked, steeling herself for the worst. "Our scouts have reported a massive alien fleet heading towards Earth," Adams said. "They'll be here within the week, and from the looks of it, they're bringing everything they've got." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the news sink in. She had always known that this day would come, that the aliens would not take their defeat lying down. But she had hoped for a little more time to rest and regroup before the next battle began. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes, scanning the faces of the soldiers around her. She saw the same determination and resolve that had carried them through the last battle, and she knew that they would not back down, no matter what the odds. "All right," she said, her voice ringing out over the battlefield. "You heard the general. The aliens are coming back, and they're bringing the heat. But we've beaten them once, and we'll beat them again. We'll fight them on the beaches, in the streets, in the hills and valleys. We'll never surrender, never give up. We'll show them what humanity is made of." The soldiers erupted in a roar of approval, their voices rising in a defiant chant. "Humans, humans, humans." Sarah smiled grimly. She knew that the road ahead would be long and hard, filled with sacrifice and suffering. But she also knew that they had something the aliens could never understand, the unbreakable spirit of the human race. As the soldiers began to disperse, preparing for the battles to come, Sarah took a moment to herself. She looked up at the sky, watching as the first stars began to appear in the gathering dusk. She thought of all the soldiers who had fought and died to get them to this point, the brave men and women who had given their lives to defend their home and their way of life. She thought of the challenges that lay ahead, the long, brutal war that stretched out before them like an endless road. But most of all, she thought of the incredible resilience and courage of the human spirit, the unquenchable fire that burned within each and every one of them, driving them forward even in the darkest of times. And as she stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of the battlefield and the distant sound of alien ships on the horizon, Sarah felt a sense of hope and determination that she had never known before. This was just the first battle in a long and difficult war. But with the strength and spirit of the human race behind them, she knew that they would never stop fighting. Not until they had driven the aliens from their shores and secured a future for all of humanity. The road ahead would be hard, but they would walk it together, as soldiers, as friends, as a species united in the face of an implacable foe. And in the end, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would emerge victorious, the first of many triumphs in the long and glorious history of the human race.